Peace, peace, everybody. It's your good sister, Morgan Renee Myers, tuning in with another read from All About Love by Bell Hooks. We are in chapter 2. I'm going to get right into it. If you've been following me on Instagram and Facebook and want to catch up on my past, future, and current reads, go to my YouTube channel and subscribe. I have them all under my Storytime with More of My playlist. You can look me up at Storytime with More of My, M-O-R-E-M-Y, or my name, Morgan Myers. M-Y-E-R-S. So let's hop into it. Again, we're in All About Love by Bell Hooks. We're on chapter 2, entitled Justice, Childhood Love Wins. And it starts off with a quote by Judith Viorst that reads, "Severe separations in early life leave emotional scars on the brain because they assault the essential human connection. The parent-child bond, which teaches us that we are lovable. The parent-child bond, which teaches us how to love. We cannot be whole human beings. Indeed, we may find it hard to be human without the substance of this first attachment." I felt that. I still be feeling withdrawals from my daddy being inconsistent in my life. And then my mama got distant as I became a teen. So, yeah, I feel that. We learn about love in childhood. Whether our homes are happy or troubled, our families functional or dysfunctional, it's the original school of love. I cannot remember ever wanting to ask my parents to define love. These birds is birding, ain't they? To my child's mind, love was the good feeling you got when family treated you like you mattered and you treated them like they mattered. Love was always and only about good feeling. In early adolescence, when we were whipped and told that these punishments were for your own good, or I'm doing this because I love you, my siblings and I were confused. Why was harsh punishment a gesture of love? As children do, we pretended to accept this grown-up logic, but we knew in our hearts it was not right. We knew it was a lie, just like the lie the grown-ups told when they explained after harsh punishment, "It hurts me more than it hurts you." There is nothing that creates more confusion about love in the minds and hearts of children than unkind and or cruel punishment meted out by the grown-ups that have been taught they should love and respect. Such children learn early on to question the meaning of love, to yearn for love even as they doubt it exists. On the flip side, there are masses of children who grow up confident love is a good feeling, who are never punished, who are allowed to believe that love is only about getting your needs met, your desires satisfied. In their child's mind, love is not about what they have to give. Love is mostly something given to them. When children like these are overindulged, either materially or by being allowed to act out, this is a form of neglect. These children, though not in any way abused or uncared for, are usually as unclear about love's meaning as their neglected and emotionally abandoned counterparts. Both groups have learned to think about love primarily in relation to good feelings in the context of reward and punishment. From early childhood on, most of us remember being told we were loved when we did things pleasing to our parents. And we learned to give them affirmations of love when they pleased us. As children grow, they associate love more with acts of attention, affection, and caring. They still see parents who attempt to satisfy their desires as giving love. Children from all classes tell me that they love their parents and are loved by them, even those who are being hurt or abused. When asked to define love, small children pretty much agree that it's a good feeling, like when you have something to eat that you really like, especially if it's your favorite, they will say. "My mommy loves me because she takes care of me and helps me do everything right." When asked how to love someone, they talk about giving hugs and kisses, being sweet and cuddly. The notion that love is about getting what one wants, whether it's a hug or a new sweater or a trip to Disneyland, is a way of thinking about love that makes it difficult for children to acquire a deeper emotional understanding. We like to imagine that most children will be born into homes where they will be loved, but love will not be present if the grown-ups who parent do not know how to love. Although lots of children are raised in homes where they are given some degree of care, love may not be sustained or even present. Adults across lines of class, race, and gender indict the family. Their testimony conveys worlds of childhood where love was lacking, where chaos, neglect, abuse, and coercion reigned supreme. In her recent book, Raised in Captivity, Why Does America Fail Its Children?, Lucia Hodgson documents the reality of lovelessness in the lives of a huge majority of children in the United States. Every day, thousands of children in our culture are verbally and physically abused, starved, tortured, and murdered. They are the true victims of intimate terrorism in that they have no collective voice and no rights. They remain the property of parenting adults to do with as they will. There can be no love without justice. Until we live in a culture that not only respects but also upholds basic civil rights for children, most children will not know love. In our culture, the private family dwelling is the one institutionalized sphere of power that can easily be autocratic or fascistic. As absolute rulers, parents can usually decide without any intervention what is best for their children. If children's rights are taken away in any domestic household, they have no legal recourse. Unlike women who can organize to protest sexist domination, demanding both equal rights and justice, children can only rely on well-meaning adults to assist them if they are being exploited and oppressed in the home. We all know that, irrespective of class or race, other adults rarely intervene to question or challenge what their peers are doing with their children. At a fun party, mostly of educated, well-paid professionals, a multiracial, multi-generational evening, the subject of disciplining kids by hitting was raised. Almost all the guests over 30 spoke about the necessity of using physical punishment. Many of us in the room have been smacked, whipped, and beaten as children. Men spoke the loudest in defense of physical punishment. Women, mostly mothers, talked about hitting as a last recourse, but one that they deployed when necessary. As one man bragged about the aggressive beatings he had received from his mother, sharing that they had been good for him, I interrupted and suggested that he might not be the misogynistic woman hater he is today if he had not been brutally beaten by a woman as a child. Ooh. Although it is too simplistic to assume that just because we are hit as kids, we all grow up to be people who hit, I wanted the group to acknowledge that being physically hurt or abused by grown-ups when we are children has harmful consequences in our adult life. A young professional, the mother of a small boy, bragged about the fact that she did not hit, that when her son misbehaved, she clamped down on his flesh, pinching him until he got the message. But this, too, is a form of coercive abuse. The other guests supported this young mother and her husband in their methods. I was astounded. I was a lone voice speaking out for the rights of children. Later, with other people, I suggested that had we all been listening to a man tell us that every time his wife or girlfriend does something he does not like, he just clamps down on her flesh, pinching her as hard as he can, everyone would be appalled. They would have seen the action as both coercive and abusive, yet they cannot acknowledge that it was wrong for an adult to hurt a child in this way. All the parents in that room claim that they are loving. All the people in that room were college educated. Most call themselves good liberals, supportive of civil rights and feminism. But when it came to the rights of children, they had a different standard. One of the most important social myths we must debunk if we are to become a more loving culture is the one that teaches parents that abuse and neglect can coexist with love. Abuse and neglect negate love. Care and affirmation, the opposite of abuse and humiliation, are the foundation of love. No one can rightfully claim to be loving when behaving abusively, yet parents do this all the time in our culture. Children are told that they are loved even though they are being abused. It is a testimony to the failure of loving practice that abuse is happening in the first place. Many of the men who offer their personal testimony in Boyhood, Growing Up Male tell stories of random violent abuse by parents that inflicted trauma. In his essay, When My Father Hit Me, Bob Shelby describes the pain of repeated beatings by his dad, stating, "From these experiences with my father, I learned about the abuse of power. By physically hitting my mother and me, he effectively stopped us from reacting to his humiliation of us. We ceased to protest his violations of our boundaries and his ignoring our sense of being individuals with needs, demands, and rights of our own." Throughout his essay, Shelby expresses contradictory understandings about the meaning of love. On one hand, he says, "I have no doubt that my father loved me, but his love became misdirected. He said he wanted to give me what he didn't have as a child." On the other hand, Shelby confesses, "What he most showed me, however, was his difficulty in being loved. All his life he had struggled with feelings of being unloved." When Shelby describes his childhood, it is clear that his dad had affection for him and also gave him care some of the time. However, his dad did not know how to give and receive love. The affection he gave was undermined by the abuse. Writing from the space of adult recollection, Shelby talks about the impact of physical abuse on his boyhood psyche. As the intensity of the pain of his hits increased, I felt the hurt in my heart. I realized what hurt me the most were my feelings of love for this man who was hitting me. I covered my love with a dark cloth of hate. A similar story is told by other men in autobiographical A similar story is told by other men in autobiographical narrative, men of all classes and races. One of the myths about lovelessness is that it exists only among the poor and deprived. Yet lovelessness is not a function of poverty or material lack. In homes where material privileges abound, children suffer emotional neglect and abuse. In order to cope with the pain of wounds inflicted in childhood, most of the men in boyhood sought some form of therapeutic care. To find their way back to love, they had to heal. Many men in our culture never recover from childhood unkindness. Studies show that males and females who are violently humiliated and abused repeatedly with no caring intervention are likely to be dysfunctional and will be predisposed to abuse others violently. In Jarvis J. Masters' book, Finding Freedom, Writings from Death Row, a chapter called Scars recounts his recognition that a vast majority of the scars covering the bodies of fellow inmates, not all of whom were on death row, were not, as one might think, the result of violent adult interactions. These men were covered with scars from childhood beatings inflicted by parenting adults. Yet, he reports, none of them saw themselves as the victims of abuse. Throughout my many years of institutionalization, I, like so many of these men, unconsciously took refuge behind prison walls. Not until I read a series of books for adults who had been abused as children did I become committed to the processes of examining my own childhood. Organizing the men for group discussion, Masters writes, I spoke to them of the pain I had carried through more than a dozen institutions, and I explained how all these events ultimately trapped me in a pattern of lashing out against everything. Like many abused children, male and female, these men were beaten by mothers, fathers, and other parental caregivers. When Masters' mother dies, he feels grief that he cannot be with her. The other inmates do not understand this longing since she neglected and abused him. He responds, she had neglected me, but am I to neglect myself as well by denying that I wished I'd seen her when she died, that I still love her? Even on death row, Masters' heart remains open, and he can honestly confess to longing to give and receive love. Being hurt by parenting adults rarely alters a child's desire to love and be loved by them. Among grown-ups who were wounded in childhood, the desire to be loved by uncaring parents persists, even when there's clear acceptance of the reality that this love will never be forthcoming. Often, children will want to remain with parental caregivers who have hurt them because of their pathetic feelings for those adults. They will cling to the misguided assumption that their parents love them even in the face of remembered abuse, usually by denying the abuse and focusing on random acts of care. In the prologue to Creating Love, John Bradshaw calls this confusion about love mystification. He shares, I was brought up to believe that love is rooted in blood relationships. You naturally loved anyone in your family. Love is not a choice. The love I learned about was bound by duty and obligation. My family taught me our culture's rules and beliefs about love. Even with the best intentions, our parents often confuse love with what we would now call abuse. To demystify the meaning of love, the art and practice of loving, we need to use sound definitions of love when talking with children, and we also need to ensure that loving action is never tainted with abuse. In a society like ours, where children are denied full civil rights, it is absolutely crucial that parenting adults learn how to offer loving discipline. Setting boundaries and teaching children how to set boundaries for themselves prior to misbehavior is an essential part of loving parenting. When parents start out disciplining children by using punishment, this becomes the pattern children respond to. Loving parents work hard to discipline without punishment. This does not mean that they never punish, only that when they do punish, they choose punishments like timeouts or the taking away of privileges. They focus on teaching children how to be self-disciplining and how to take responsibility for their actions. Since the vast majority of us were raised in households where punishment was deemed the primary, if not the only way to teach disciplines, the fact that discipline can be taught without punishment surprises many people. One of the simplest ways children learn discipline is by learning how to be orderly in daily life, to clean up any messes they make. Just teaching a child to take responsibility for placing toys in the appropriate place after playtime is one way to teach the responsibility of self-discipline. Learning to clean up the mess made during playtime helps a child learn to be responsible, and they can learn from this practical act how to cope with emotional mess. Were there current television shows that actually modeled loving parenting, parents could learn these skills. Television shows oriented toward families often favorably represent children when they are overindulged, are disrespectful, or are acting out. Often they behave in a more adult manner than the parents. What we see on television today actually, at best, models for us inappropriate behavior and, in worst case scenarios, unloving behaviors. A great example of this is a movie like Home Alone, which celebrates disobedience and violence. But television can portray caring, loving family interaction. There are whole generations of adults who talk nostalgically about how they wanted their families to be like the fictive portraits of family life portrayed on Leave It to Beaver or My Three Sons. We desired our families to be like those we saw on the screen because we were witnessing loving parenting, loving households. Expressing to parents our desire to have families like the one we saw on the screen, we were often told that the families were not realistic. The reality was, however, that parents who come from unloving homes have never learned how to love and cannot create loving home environments or see them as realistic when watching them on television. The reality they are most familiar with and trust is the one they knew intimately. There was nothing utopian. So I want to pause here real quick because she talked about early in the book that we have, I think that the word is catholic, which basically means that you can, let's see, I love it. It was in chapter 1, cathexis. So cathetic meant, basically, you could have like a form of attachment or show care, but it's not the same. It's not the same as love. Let's see. Okay, so we can feel deeply drawn to someone. We cathet with them. That is, we invest feelings or emotion in them. That process of investment wherein a loved one becomes important to us is called cathexis. And people confuse cathething with loving. So you could have had a parent that had, a childhood that wasn't the greatest and they wanted to do better for you. They still may have did some things that they, saw and experienced growing up, beating you because they love you or to protect you or whatever. But it still may not be, according to Bell Hooks, still may not be genuine love. It could be cathexis because you've grown close to this person and you know them and you show them care. But what she's speaking on is like genuine love. Genuine love would not allow us to abuse one another. You cannot say you love and abuse somebody. All right, so the reality was, however, that parents who come from unloving homes have never learned how to love and cannot create loving home environments or see them as realistic when watching them on television. The reality they are most familiar with and trust is the one they knew intimately. There was nothing utopian about the way problems were resolved on these shows. Parent and child discussion, critical reflection, and finding a way to make amends was usually the process by which misbehavior was addressed. On both shows, there was never just one parenting figure. Even though the mother was absent on My Three Sons, the lovable Uncle Charlie was a second parent. In a loving household where there are several parental caregivers, when a child feels one parent is being unjust, that child can appeal to another adult for mediation, understanding, or support. We live in a society where there are a growing number of single parents, female and male, but the individual parent can always choose a friend to be another parenting figure, however limited their interaction. This is why the categories of godmother and godfather are so crucial. When my best girlhood friend chose to have a child without a father in the household, I became the godmother, a second parenting figure. My friend's daughter turns to me to intervene if there's a misunderstanding or miscommunication between her and her mom. Here's one small example. My adult friend had never received an allowance as a child and did not feel she had the available extra money to offer an allowance to her daughter. She also believed her daughter would use all the money to buy sweets. Telling me that her daughter was angry with her over the issue, she opened up the space for us to have a dialogue. I shared my belief that allowances are important ways to teach children discipline, boundaries, and working through desires versus needs. I knew enough about my friend's finances to challenge her insistence that she could not afford to pay a small allowance, while simultaneously encouraging her not to project the wrongs of her childhood onto the present. As to whether the daughter would buy candy, I suggested she give the allowance with a statement of hope that it would not be used for overindulgence and see what happened. It all worked out just fine. Happy to have an allowance, the daughter... Now wait, you said she couldn't afford it. Unless that was a typo. I knew enough about my friend's finances to challenge her insistence that she could not afford... Okay. To challenge her insistence that she could not afford to pay a small allowance. While simultaneously... Okay, got you. So it all worked out fine. Happy to have an allowance. The daughter chose to save her money to buy things she thought were really important. And candy was not on this list. Had there not been another adult parenting figure involved, it might have taken these two a longer time to resolve their conflict, and unnecessary estrangement and wounding might have occurred. Significantly, love and respectful interaction between two adults exemplify for the daughter, who was told about the discussion, ways of problem solving. By revealing her willingness to accept criticism and her capacity to reflect on her behavior and change, the mother modeled for her daughter, without losing dignity or authority, the recognition that parents are not always right. Until we begin to see loving parenting in all walks of life in our culture, many people will continue to believe we can only teach discipline through punishment, and that harsh punishment is an acceptable way to relate to children. Because children can intimately offer affection or respond to affectionate care by returning it, it is often assumed that they know how to love and therefore do not need to learn the art of loving. While the will to love is present in very young children, they still need guidance in the ways to love. Grown-ups provide that guidance. Love is as love does, and it is our responsibility to give children love. When we love children, we acknowledge by our every action that they are not property, that they have rights, that we respect and uphold their rights. Without justice, there can be no love. I appreciate this chapter. That's the end of chapter 2. I appreciate this. I don't have children. I've run an in-home daycare. I've watched other people's children. And obviously when I'm watching them, I can't put my hands on them. So I've learned how to navigate disciplining children without doing that. And I do wish that I don't feel like, yeah, I do know that my mom loves me, but I feel like some of the beatings and whoopings could have been negated with a conversation. I was such a sensitive child. I still am, sensitive adult, to the point where like you could just speak harshly or in a tone or make a face of disappointment that would bring me to my knees. And my mother has that ability with her tone and how she rocked. She could have just said things to me that triggered me and made me realize, oh, this is not something that I should be doing, versus getting shoes thrown at me, like, and you messing up your plant. So now you mad at me because your plant leaves is knocked off because your aim is off, and when you throwing shoes at me, and belts and beatings, and I never did get the extension cord and getting beat out the bathtub and all that. That's insane. But I feel what she's saying. We as adults have to speak up and stand in for children. And I'm not a parent, but I see the pressure of parents, and I see what y'all be going through. So I understand how it's quick to just hit or lash out, when you're irritated or a child doing something, or they jumping off the couch, so you hit them to stop because they're not listening. I do understand the plight of parenting, although I'm not one. So I'll just say that's she just made some good valid points. Not everybody agrees on not hitting or pinching your child as discipline. Some people feel like just talking, or I've even heard the joke of that standing in the corner, that timeout shit is white people shit. That's not something that black people do. We got to get physical. We got to let them know I beat you because I love you. Yeah, that's really all my thoughts on it. I'm just sitting with that because she's saying that, nah, you don't got to do that to show love to a child. And I'm kind of in agreement with that. And I wish I didn't get some of the beatings and belts and shoes thrown at me growing up. Like, emotionally, that still impacts me. Speak to me sternly. And I think that's the thing too with parenting, because I'm watching some parents and I see how they interact with their children. Some of y'all don't even really be talking to y'all children like that. You parent them, you have lordship and authority over them, but y'all don't really give the child a voice. And I don't think that is disrespectful to let a child, speak their mind or ask questions or debate with you. Now, yeah, when it gets disrespectful, teach them how to, check their tone, bring it back down. But I just see a lot of lashing out because the child not doing what you want or not listening to them. You just quick to hit, and I feel like that's misguided. Like, we have to have some middle ground where children feel comfortable coming to you, speak up for themselves. Because when there's discomfort and lack of trust, then that's when we go to the outside sources and people. That's how we get abused by other people. We already have this form of lovelessness and abuse in our home. So when we out in the streets now, we'll accept that from other people. We'll accept verbal abuse. We'll accept a little smack here and there because we're accustomed to it. So I feel like having good relationships as far as communicating with your child. Khalik, you ain't sad as you, baby. All them sad emojis. Nah, but it's really real. It's really real. So this is a good read. Okay, I'm interested in seeing what chapter 3 is going to be about. Honesty, be true to love. We'll get to that another day. Again, if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, do yourself a favor and do that so you can catch up on my past readings, future and current readings. I primarily focus on books by Black authors. That's just what I'm into. and anybody local as well. So you'll be seeing me do more local reads too. And stay tuned for some upcoming things that I have going on with my own personal poetry book, The Celibacy Chronicles. The 7-year anniversary is coming up this December, and I'll be hosting a talk back and listening party out here in Jacksonville, Florida, where I'm now located, to get the locals hip to what your girl got going on. It was a success for the 5-year anniversary in Greensboro, North Carolina. So I would like to reenact that out here and just get the conversation going about real life. She's talking about kids. How did kids get here? Somebody had to do it. Had to have some sensual, sacred energy exchange, if you will. So yeah, let's talk about it. Because in my book, I discuss how basically my childhood and things that I dealt with, and going into college, being a young woman without my father, parental figure really around to guide me and give me information about dealing with men and things like that. And then my mother's own traumatic upbringing and the lack of what she could teach or tell me about my experience as a young woman led me to some decisions that got me caught up in some stuff, that had me dealing with some things, that had me going through to a point where I had to sit down. So let me take some time out. Let me put this poo nanny up and let me get real with myself and realize what's going on here. So I wrote a book about it, and I feel like, we're out here creating life. We're having kids. We're getting in and out of relationships, but sometimes we don't have those hard conversations that we know we need to have. We play all day on the internet. We make jokes and memes about different stuff, but baby, life really be real. And a lot of our decisions, or a lot of our consequences come from decisions that we make. And so a lot of turmoil in our life, it's mostly a direct factor, some accountability that needs to be taken on how we're running and maneuvering our lives, the boundaries or lack thereof that we set, who we interact with, how, yada, yada, yada. So, come on, 7-year anniversary. Okay, yeah, 7 years. So it's time for me to get some new literature out to y'all. This will be a book that I promote for the entirety of my life because it's really good. The content is really good, and it's good for everybody. My target audience is 14 plus, but it's a book for everybody. He, she, they, them, gender non-conforming, everybody in between. Because despite your body, your personhood, what you identify as, we like to get busy. We like to exchange energy with one another, no matter how it's coming, how it's packaged, what you like, what you into. Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's get real with ourselves, and our mental, physical, spiritual health. But I appreciate y'all for tuning in. I hope y'all enjoy this and keep up with me as I continue this. If you have any book suggestions that you want to throw my way, again, my focus is on Black authors because our literature, I'm just for my people first. So sorry, not sorry. And I want to hear our stories. So yeah, appreciate y'all for tuning in. I hope y'all have an amazing day, and I'll check in with y'all again soon. Yes, sacred energy exchange is very sacred. We gotta be choicey about who we share our energy with. Okay, baby. All right, y'all have an amazing day. Thanks for the literature and thought-provoking conversation. Always, Khalid, and I appreciate your support and love, and I hope you have an amazing day. Peace.